Adversity is one of the greatest forms of persistent resilience that anyone could ever ask for. It helps to build up our consequence of character and our reserve of reasoning once adversity comes knocking at our respective doors. The good thing is that none of us are immune, and we all experience some form of challenging times throughout the course of our lifetime. And no more is this more evident than with our military in America. It's estimated by my friends over at the Pew Research Center that more than 1 in 10 servicemen and women were seriously injured at one point or another while serving in the military. Meanwhile, 3/4 of those injuries were expected to occur while in combat. For my friend Brian Fleming, he's a combat wounded war veteran who was injured by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. He used his injury as an example to overcome adversity and turn it into an influential and lucrative speaking career that has spanned the better part of 17 years. He speaks to organizations and associations about resilience, the power of overcoming adversity, and how to use their own individual story to make a memorable and lasting difference. He's the founder of UseYourStory.com, where he demonstrates to other business-minded professionals how they can use their own story to make a side hustle and a meaningful difference. Fleming joined me this week to chat about his time in Afghanistan, how he got through those challenging times by using resilience as his own superpower, his view on gratitude, life, and how we can all work together to heal societal divisions and use our own story to build our own form of a legacy. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, my friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend. You've got an interesting and thought-provoking story, so I'm excited to see you this afternoon, and thanks for a few minutes, my friend.
Absolutely.
And I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by you telling me about your story, my friend, because I know you're a suicide bombing survivor, and you served the country, my friend, in Afghanistan. So thank you for your service, my friend. And I'm curious to ask you how that experience brings you to your definition of the word perspective. So how did that situation and scenario affect the way you view life, my friend?
Yeah, the biggest thing I want to make sure everybody understands is that everybody in life gets blown up. In my case, it was a suicide bomber trying to kill me. But everybody goes through tough times. Everybody has challenges and traumas and things they go through that blow them up. It takes their life, and it sends them in a direction and into experiences sometimes they never foresaw or they couldn't imagine. And then they're left to try to piece it all back together and figure it out, while the train of life is still in motion and moving with or without them. So we all speak this language of pain, and there are a lot of things we're taught to believe about life, and sometimes you have these very difficult experiences, these traumatic, life altering experiences, and they challenge what you've been taught to believe about how life actually is. And as you said, your perspective, and hard times do challenge our perspectives. And if we keep moving forward and being productive and optimistic and trying to figure life out, if we keep taking steps forward, we often walk away from those challenges we face with a better, renewed perspective and a higher state of understanding as far as perspective is concerned.
Yeah, and Brian, I know that you turned your circumstances into a lucrative speaking career, my friend, and I know you talk to audiences about the power of resilience. Brian, one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you today, buddy, was because I was also born with cerebral palsy, buddy, and I found out at the age of 9 that I wouldn't be able to walk for the duration of my life. But I always tell people that life is a deck of playing cards, my friend, and it's up to all of us to shuffle them in the direction that we want life to go. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. In some way or another, everybody's dealt a bad hand at some point or another, or if you're like me, multiple times in your life. And it's not about the hand you're dealt, it's how you play the hand. And you don't have any other option except to sit there and cry about it, but that doesn't help you or anyone else. And so playing the hand you're dealt, figuring it out, even if that hand has never been played by somebody you know, sometimes the way you perceive the hand you're dealt and you come up with a solution that nobody told you, sometimes you're an innovator. You found a new way to overcome something, or at least that worked for you and can work for other people. So a lot of good and progress can come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I'm curious to ask you about your definition of the word resilience itself, my friend, and how the word resilience has helped you to cultivate a successful speaking career. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, my personal definition of resilience is your ability to put up with tough situations. It's resilience, being able to endure, being able to get through hard times when there doesn't look like there's any way out. Your ability to do something and not give up. And just to give some perspective to your listeners, I served with the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division fighting the ground war in Afghanistan back in 2006. I was a team leader in an infantry platoon, so our job was to go out and find bad guys and get them. It wasn't to wait for them to come to us. We went out and we picked fights with terrorists, and a lot of things happened during that time. I was inside of two vehicles that were blown up and totally destroyed. The first one by a couple of roadside bombs, a roadside bomb that was a double stack of anti-tank mines. And I actually walked away from that one uninjured. But then a few months later, on July 24th of 2006, a suicide bomber drove his minivan into my door of my vehicle and exploded and blew himself and his van into about a billion pieces right there in the street. And I woke up on the side of Highway 1 in Kandahar and not knowing what happened. I was burned second degree on my face and neck, which is now healed, third degree on both my hands. And I spent a year and 2 months at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, having my burned, charred skin scraped off with razor blades while I was awake and conscious and going through that torture. But they did it because they had to save me. They were saving my life so I wouldn't die of infection. Then I had surgery, skin graft, reconstructive surgery, and spent the next year and 2 months at that hospital. And so I say that only to say anybody hearing my advice I give today, uh, that this is the perspective I'm coming from. These are the experiences I'm speaking from. I didn't read about this stuff in a book, though I've read books on it. Most of the things I talk about, I've learned through personal life experience. And so that's where I'm coming from today, in case anybody's wondering.
Well, I thank you for that clarification. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is how we work together as a society to become better leaders, based on your experience. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how we work together to become leaders that other people or other generations want to follow. What would be your best pieces of wisdom there, my friend?
I would say two things: be open minded and be generous. We don't know everything we could possibly know. There are better solutions we've not yet come up with or we're not doing. And have a generous mindset toward people, whether they agree with you or not, because their life is not so black and white as a lot of people like to think it is, as far as the polarizing news media saying, well, it's either this way or it's that way concerning this issue or that issue. Life is very much gray. I was raised very, very religious, and I was taught that life is it's only black and white. It's only this way or that way. The older I get, I'll be 40 years old next month. The older I get, the more I realize life is not entirely black and white. Life is a big gray area when it comes to most issues. And we need to understand that if we have our ideas and they're good and they're helpful for people, then we need to push those. Now, if there's opposition to that, if somebody else is being hurt by that, or it's hurting people in other ways, we also need to be open-minded enough and generous-minded enough to look at the full picture, not just our side of it, and say, hey, is our solution the best or is someone else's? Or where can we meet in the middle? It's about making this a better place for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, happy early birthday, my friend.
Thank you.
Is there anything on your birthday wish list, my friend?
I don't know, man. This will be the 40th one. I haven't quite thought about that yet.
Oh, well, that only means you gotta have a big party, right? It's important to celebrate life, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I'm grateful for every year that I get. I never know when the last birthday will be. None of us do.
Well, that's why we have to celebrate life. It's important. But my
That's right.
friend, I know you're the founder and CEO of UseYourStory.com, my friend. So tell me about that venture and why people are gravitating towards it, my friend.
Yeah, I've been speaking professionally for different conferences and conventions all over the world for the past 17 years. And I used my story of getting injured in Afghanistan. I started talking about it on stages, but not to just talk about myself, but because I realized that if I talk about my story, it helps people, but it also helped me. I learned that years later that it was actually very therapeutic for me. But I learned that I could take my life story, something nobody can take from me, and I can position it from a place of value that helps people. I can talk about the lessons that I learned through my really tough life experiences and talk to people about how those lessons I learned apply to their own situation and the battles they're facing in their lives right now, and help them win the battles that they're facing. And so I realized I could make my story value driven. I could position it in a way that it helps people. And so I went around and I started looking for people who had problems that I had overcome. And I would talk a little bit about my story. Only my whole speech is only about 10% of my story. Like when I talk about the injury in Afghanistan, that's only about 10% of my speech. The rest of it is about how the lessons I learned apply to your life so that you can win whatever battle you're facing. So, and I never meant to do this either. I met a guy who was an injured Vietnam veteran while I was in the hospital, and he took this route, and he had been a speaker and author for 30 some years at that point, maybe more. And I remember after his speech, it was so great. I talked to him, and we sort of became friends. And he said, Brian, if you want to do something that matters with all this, let me know. I'll show you how to do it. And so I was very fortunate that somebody came into my life at the time he did at no doing of my own. I didn't arrange that. We happened to cross paths. And it turns out it didn't just change my life. Meeting him transformed my family tree, because now I know things in business. I know how to speak to people. I can provide a life for my family I never would have had the ability to do before, all because a guy taught me how to relate to people on a heart level and a soul level sharing my story and helping them win the battles they're facing. And so when you're asking about Use Your Story, useyourstory.com, I created that because over the years, over the past 17 some years, people have always come up to me after my speeches and said, man, it's great you're using your story. I have a story. I want to do what you do. Well, how do I start? Where do I get started? Who would want to hear my story? Or where would I even begin? Or, does my story even matter? And of course it does. And so I created this to help people get launched and started sharing their own stories. It's what I would have done 17 years ago, just getting started. If I didn't know anything else to do, I would have started the way I teach at useyourstory.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Brian, I'm curious because, as you know, as a speaker, we all have to have value propositions or the problems that we solve. So I'm curious, how do you think we can better define value propositions if we want to get into speaking? And how can we use our own stories to make a meaningful difference? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, what you want to do to create that value proposition and make your story valuable to people is you want to marry your story to a problem that people know they have and they don't like it and they want it gone. So that's what makes people want to book you to speak and share your story. It's because I always say nobody really cares about my story. They care about what my story can do for them. They care about what my story can do for them and help them accomplish. The reason I get booked and paid to speak by companies and conventions and conferences, these different places, is because they think in some way me sharing my story and the lessons I've learned can help them reach some sort of accomplishment or goal that they're trying to reach. And so take your story and marry it. Find a problem that people deal with and marry your story, wrap it around that, and then help solve the problem. Just use your story as the catalyst, as sort of the hook.
Yeah, and Brian, I'm curious to get your definition of the concept of perseverance and what the word perseverance means to you, my friend. What does that word mean to you?
Perseverance to me means to keep going when you feel like quitting. And I learned a lot about that in the military. There were a lot of times living up in the mountains of Afghanistan, wearing, 100 pounds of gear. You're at 10, 12, 13,000 feet in elevation. It can be 20 degrees at night and 120 during the day down at sea level. And you're fighting a war. You have people trying to kill you while you're hunting them. Very, very difficult life to live. And there are a lot of times in your mind you just go, gosh, dang it. You're like, man, I wish, we could go back right now. I'd rather be playing video games or something else. When you want to give up and quit, but you don't, because you don't stop when you get tired. You stop when you're done, when you've accomplished your mission, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And when you have that kind of mindset, you will have a strongly persevering mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to also ask you about the principles that we can use to shift our mindset and thinking. Because, I always tell people that we make time for the things that we prioritize, but if we don't have the mindset to get our goals accomplished, it's hard to prioritize a mission, my friend. So, what do you think is the key to successfully shifting your mindset? What are your thoughts there?
I would say just look at what you care about. People, like you said, people make time for things that matter. And if they don't make time for something, it's because it doesn't matter that much. Something else matters more to them. And also look at the things you're trying to avoid in life. Because people will work hard to accomplish something. But in general, we will work even harder to avoid something we do not want happening. And so just looking at what you want in life and what you don't want, be very raw and honest with yourself. And what is it I'm going for? And you know what? I really want this particular XYZ outcome. But if I don't get that outcome, what's my life actually going to look like? Well, if I fail to get that outcome, here's what failing to do that looks like. And, maybe you're wanting to, save up and get a new car or something. And if you fail to accomplish that mission, what's life going to look like? Well, you're going to have to keep paying repairs on a car that maybe doesn't start every day, or it takes longer and it's more expensive to fix. And then, then your buddies keep giving you crap too because you haven't gotten a new car yet, and, all this stuff. And then you're embarrassed. And like, you see, when you know what's at stake, when you're not, if you don't accomplish what you set out to do, it can be a massively greater motivator to keep going when you feel like quitting than simply thinking about what it's going to feel like to sit in that brand new Mustang or that brand new Jeep or whatever it is. Pain is a great motivator.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And, pain and time constraints are also great motivators, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. You put a time limit on something. I mean, that's where productivity goes up. At least for people like me. If I have a time limit, I will get more done in 1 hour here in my office than I will in a whole day if there's not a time limit or some sort of constraint, because something in my mind goes into mission mode, and I'll forget to go to the bathroom. I'll forget to eat. I'll forget to pick my kids up at school. I think that happened once because I was so focused on getting something done because it was so important and there was a time crunch. And you know what? I got it done.
Yeah, and Brian, I know one of the things you help people understand is that they can make up to $10,000 an hour by simply sharing their story, and you help people make telling their story a successful side hustle in 30 days, my friend. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear how you help people to do that, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing you need to understand is that there are organizations, businesses, associations, conferences, conventions, groups that meet, and they have budgets to pay for speakers and trainers to come in and teach certain types of content, teachings to their people. And if they don't use that money, they might not get that much money back next quarter when the budgets come out. And so a lot of times you get near the end of a quarter or the end of the fiscal year, you could have a company that wants to hire a speaker, and the department with the budget, they're like, hey, if we don't give this 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever to a speaker to come in and talk, we're not getting it next time. So we're like, we need to find a good speaker who won't make us look bad and who will deliver good value and people will enjoy. And it's almost like we need someone to throw this money at. So, I figure if they need that and it's something I speak on, they might as well be throwing it at me or someone like you. If it's something we talk on and we can be very helpful and valuable for them. And so there is money out there because your story is valuable. Your story matters. Your story is valuable to people because it can help them solve problems or motivate their people to keep going when they feel like quitting or increase their productivity, whatever it is you speak on. The reason speakers like us get paid is because we provide value, and value is pretty much always delivered in the form of helping them solve a problem they have. Our speech is, we are the product. Our speech is the product that they're buying in order to get a desired outcome. And to some people, it might sound crazy. Wow, we like make $10,000 an hour speaking. I've been paid that, and they said, look, we don't want you to. They literally said, I remember one time they said, look, you have 40 minutes, not a minute more. But in 40 minutes, get off the stage. We're on a super tight schedule. I said, okay, you understand it. My fee doesn't change based on the time. The lady's like, I don't care. Like, just 40 minutes and off the stage. So it wasn't even 60 minutes. It was 40 minutes, and I would have done another 20, but they didn't care and they didn't want me to. So it all depends, though. Some people might think, that's not possible for me. Like $10,000, $5,000, $2,500 to go give a speech, it's weird to people because especially if they grew up poor like me, nobody made that kind of money where I grew up. I grew up poor, man. We weren't blue collar. We couldn't afford a collar. All right. So then in the military, I was making what, 2,500, $3,000 a month, getting shot at and blown up fighting terrorists. Now somebody's going to pay me that same amount or more for an hour or a half hour of my time to come talk. I had to mentally adapt to that. But speaking, the pay schedule is different when you're a speaker. Speaking pays way different than most other jobs and careers out there. And so you get out there, you share your story, you help people. Some places have budgets, some don't. Some have bigger budgets. And by the way, if that whole 10,000 number seems weird, I'll say this. If you go to useyourstory.com right now, I have a free resource called the free Share Your Story Roadmap, where I will show you how to make your first $500 speaking in the next 30 days and make a difference sharing your story. It's a free PDF. It has a short video that goes with it. I explain the whole thing. And maybe your listeners are thinking, man, $5,000 or $10,000 sharing my story, that'll never happen. That's unrealistic. Well, how about 500? Can you start there? I'll tell you right now, you can start there. You can make that much speaking, even if you're not getting paid a speaking fee, because there are several ways to make money speaking.
As long as you're a good communicator, you can make a lot of money speaking. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. I see a lot of celebrities and athletes speak, and they absolutely suck at speaking, but they have name recognition and they draw a crowd, so they get paid a lot of money. But yes, normal people like us, you should always be honing your craft and getting better and learning how to present better and communicate your story and your value even better. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Brian, one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast was I looked at the world and I said to myself, there had to be more that binds us together rather than tearing us apart. So how do you think we can do a better job as a society based on your experience and personal life and healing societal divisions? Brian, I call it creating more bridges of unity. So how do you think we can come together as a society to solve more problems? What are your thoughts there?
Well, the first thing I would say is realize that everybody is a human just like you, and everybody pretty much wants the same things you do. Basic human needs, want to be loved and accepted, heard, understood, taken care of. They want to live a life that's meaningful. They want to be productive. They don't want people trying to cheat them. They want to have, live in a safe place for their families. They want to be able to provide and live a meaningful, fulfilling life. That's what all of us want. Another thing is to be careful not to judge people based on how they look, whether it's their skin color or their culture, or maybe it's a guy with a bunch of face tattoos. I was working out at the gym this morning and a new guy came in, and he had way more tattoos than me, and he even had neck and face tattoos. And so instantly, my thoughts like, oh man, this guy, I don't know, is he a criminal? Is he? And then I thought to myself, I was in the military. I have tattoos. He might be the nicest guy in the world, and he and I, we kind of talked for a minute and give each other fist bumps and, hey, how you doing? Introduced myself. He was a nice guy. But upon just looking at him, you would think because of the tattooed exterior, the tattoos on the face, excuse me, you might think that he was a criminal or a bad guy, but he wasn't. And we need to make sure we're not doing that when we look at other people, because it's so easy to do. And if we do that to each other, we're just dividing against ourselves. It doesn't help any of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I'm also curious to ask you, what do you think it means to make authentic human connections with an audience as a speaker? What do you think that means to you?
What, can you say that again?
Yeah, I'm just curious to ask you, what do you think it means to make authentic connections with an audience and really meet them at the level to where they are? What does that mean to you, my friend?
Yeah, what I think of there is empathy, meaning it's a certain level of talking to people in a way where you communicate that you understand where they are or how they feel or what they're going through. There's almost nothing more that bonds people together more strongly in the world than people somehow enduring suffering together. That's why the military creates such strong bonds, because people in the military, we suffer together so much, whether in training or in war, that it's a very bonding experience. When people understand that you're just like them, and you're not up there, you're not high and mighty, speaking from your ivory tower, looking down over your glasses at them like you're better. That's all just ego. That's all just made up. But when you are willing to be transparent and very humble and honest about the struggles you've faced in life and what you've overcome, and how you have a desire to help other people do the same in some way, people will absolutely love you. And they're grateful that, with all the bad news we see and all the politics and all the crap on media that we see every day, it's so refreshing to see someone who's been through something, but they came out of it a good person, maybe even a better person than they were before. And now they're trying to do good in the world, because that's contagious. Just like hate is contagious and fear is contagious, so is generosity and love and empathy. If you're driving through traffic and somebody waves you in and lets you go in front of them instead of speeding up really fast when they see you're trying to pull out, if they let you in, you feel good about that. And you're probably more likely to be generous and let somebody else pull out instead of speeding up and cutting them off as well.
Yeah, and Brian, I'm curious to ask you about how you define the word grateful, my friend, and what brings you the most grace in life, my friend? So, how do you look at the concept of being grateful for what you have in life? What are your thoughts there?
I'm grateful for anything I get. Like I said, I grew up so poor, we had nothing. And so I always tell people, I'll never ask you for something for free, but if you offer me something free, I'll probably take it. But it's because I'm grateful, for me at least. I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had to discover and do things. Not that I've been handed a bunch of things, but I've been throughout my life consistently presented with opportunities to do things. It wasn't a handout. The speaking career I have and who I am today, nobody did this for me. But there were certain key people that came into my story along the way and presented me with opportunities, and it was my choice to either take those opportunities or to not take those opportunities. And the outcomes would be one thing or another, and whether good or bad or indifferent, those outcomes are my fault. And then the work I put into those efforts, based on what I chose to do, those are to my own credit, but also there's actually quite a bit of luck. It's like, that old phrase. Who was it? Mark Twain. He said, was it Mark Twain or Henry David Thoreau? I don't remember, but he said something like, "The harder I work, the more luck I seem to have." So I think that's probably true of my life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Brian, I'm a huge believer in creating our own internal motivation because, I always say that in life, if we don't set our own standard of expectations, it's hard to rise to the level of anybody else's for our own life, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you about how you define or sort of get motivated to find the internal motivation to go after the things you want to accomplish. What are your thoughts there?
My internal motivations at that sort of level are usually more pain driven than anything. I mean, if I'm tired and I just want to take a break or just throw my hands in the air, if there's some sort of outcome I do not want to happen that will happen if I don't finish this thing and see it through, it's more like that sort of pushes me through when I get tired of pulling. I always say that like motivation is sort of like pulling ourselves through something, but then when motivation dies, it's that inner drive, that conviction, or that thing that we do not want to happen that will continue to suddenly push us instead of us pulling. When we're too tired to pull anymore, it'll actually push us in the direction we want to go because we're trying to make sure a certain outcome does not happen. You avoid one outcome and accomplish another.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, I'm also fascinated to ask you, how do you think we can use our own adversity as a competitive advantage? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's using your own adversity is a great way to gain a competitive advantage because it makes you distinct. There are so many products and services and speakers, people who have, things are kind of all the same story or they're not that different. But when you pull out details from your own story, those are unique to you. Here's an example. There are a lot of speakers, professional speakers like me, who speak on overcoming adversity or resilience. So if there's 50 of us lined up, well, what makes me any different than the other 49? Well, I can say, well, hey, I was injured by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan who exploded 3 feet away from me. I spent a year and 2 months at the hospital. I had my skin scraped off, my burned skin scraped off with razor blades. Now, I had to get through that. I did get through that. I bounced back. I built a productive life for myself. And I stayed married to the same woman who I married 3 months before going to Afghanistan. So if your people want to know how to get through hard times and overcome the challenges they're facing and move forward productively, not just at work but with their families, I'm happy to talk to you about that. And on top of that, have you ever hired a speaker who literally survived being attacked by a suicide bomber? Or would that be something new and fresh for you? See, I just took my story and made me distinct among other people who have a same general story as me of overcoming, but I made me distinct because I pulled unique details out of my own story to do so. And you can do that, and anybody can do that.
Yeah, and as a speaker, Brian, I'm curious, since you've been in the game for as long as you have, my friend. I'm wondering if you have 3 points of contact when you give a speech where you want to hit it in order to maximize the value to the audience. So I guess what I'm asking is the three key principles of success when you're giving a speech. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the big thing is, in getting booked to speak, getting noticed, getting booked, pages picked, so you can present. I always say there's 3 P's. If you want to start using your story, making a difference in the world through speaking, there's the problem. It's problem, promote, present. Identify a very specific problem that people are dealing with, that they know they have, and they don't like it, and they want it gone. Because those are people who are going to be willing to pay you money or come up with budgets. And they're not only that, but they're very motivated to do what you say that can help them get out of the position they're in. There's almost nothing worse than giving someone great advice that they need and then they don't use it. You just feel like you wasted your time, even if they paid you to be there. So identify the problem you can solve for people specifically that they deal with. Then promote. This is marketing. Identifying groups of people that have that problem and finding out specifically how that problem is affecting them, and then producing solutions and things like that to help them. So one way to promote is like right here with your podcast. Do you have a YouTube channel or a podcast or a blog where you write about things around the problem they deal with and how to overcome the problem they're dealing with and things related to it? That way you have a base of knowledge, a hub of information where people can find you, learn from you, trust you, and then, oh, by the way, we can have him come speak at our conference. So that's just a very basic way of looking at promotion. And then the third P is present, offering to give a presentation that not only conveys your story, but more importantly, solves the problem that they're dealing with. And so you create and you give that presentation, and after that you never stop offering valuable information. The day you stop talking about the people's problems and the enemy, the quote unquote the enemy they're facing that's causing their problems, that's when people stop listening to you. If you don't talk about the problems they're facing, they will be distracted by something else that will.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, my final question for you has to do with legacy, my friend, and how you want your personal and professional legacy to be defined. My friend, what are your thoughts there?
My biggest thing is that I just I would like for it to be said that the world is a better place because I was in it. I remember waking up in that ditch in Kandahar, and I knew I wasn't. In my mind, I knew I wasn't going to survive. I was injured badly. I didn't think I was going to make it out. I asked my medic if I was okay. He told me I was okay, but I saw the look in his eyes. I could tell he wasn't being entirely truthful. He didn't know. And in that moment, I had this really weird mental experience where I only the most important things in life immediately came to the forefront of my mind and everything else fell away. And what came to the front of my mind was, what did I do for other people and what did I do that mattered with my life? And at 19, 20 years old, I had this feeling that like I lived my life selfishly just for me and that I hadn't really hadn't helped too many people. And also that I hadn't really done anything that mattered and now it's over with. I'm going to die in this godforsaken country. I'm injured. I'm 19, 20 years old and it's my like my life. It's already over. It's not time to be over. It's too short. Like I haven't been here long enough, and it's already over. And I had this immense sense of uh, painful, irreversible regret that I didn't do more with my life, or try more, or do more for other people while I was here. And it was just this feeling that my life didn't matter because this place isn't better because I was in it. And for some reason, that mattered to me. Well, fortunately, we're talking today. So I obviously did survive. Well, that's the fire that drives me every day now because I don't want to get to be 80 or 90 or 100 years old and ask that question again and be without an answer and regret my life. There's nothing more painful than irreversible regret. And I got a second chance. So that's what legacy means to me. It's just whatever I do here, the world's better. My family's better because I was here for however much time I was. And I think that's probably the best I can do with as far as making sure my life is meaningful and that it meant something.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And finally, tell me, Brian, if people want to get connected with you, my friend, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, if you want to book me to speak at your event, just go to blownupguy.com. It's easy to remember because I'm a guy and I got blown up, so it's blownupguy.com. But if you want to share your story and make a difference, and I can teach you how to make your first $500 speaking in the next 30 days and how you can make a difference in people's lives sharing your story, be sure to go to useyourstory.com and grab that free Share Your Story roadmap.
Well, fabulous, Brian. I want to thank you for the difference that you're making in the world, my friend, and using your own story of both perseverance and resilience to show other people the way forward, my friend. You've got quite the thought-provoking and inspiring story, my friend, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Well, thanks for having me on. Your story matters, and thank you for sharing yours and doing what you do. And I want to just remind everybody that your story matters and that your story has the power to transform our world in ways you can't imagine. So get out there, keep sharing it, and keep doing a great job, bud. I appreciate you.